Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
And so I've just been thinking of my life as a timeline. And my understanding of God is that God is not unaware of our story. I want to challenge you, how well do you know your story? He says, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. If I were to actually make this look more like the hills and valleys of my mom's life or of your life, it's not that God is only in the mountaintops or only in the valleys. He's on the entire ride with us. The second thing I want to talk about today is how well do you know the story of others? Maybe that thing that happened right here when I was in the story makes so much sense when I understand what happened right here. You can only manage one timeline. The best thing I can do for my kids and for myself, and honestly for any timeline that I butt up against, is to work on my own. So 3 things I think that we would benefit from doing. Walk through your story. The next thing, it's just pray. I don't know that I want to, but I know that you know their story. Help me remember that I don't know. And then the third thing, ask for others' stories.
I wanted to ask you a question to start off.
Okay.
How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good.
That's
it was
good. That feels good.
Yes, it was good. It was very good. I do love time with my friends and family, and I do love Nashville. I do love Tennessee. But it was also what?
You're so dang believable right now.
No. I'm not convincing. But it was, and also probably because I'm thinking of what I'm going to talk about Sunday, there's many, many moments while I was in my childhood home. My parents still live in the home that we moved in when I was 2. I'm 40, so it's 42.
Wow.
So.
No, not you. That your parents still have that home. My goodness.
You just can't get away from
I can't.
the old references. So anyway, yes. So that's always an interesting dynamic. But it was good. And I see my grandmother, and she cracks me up. And she is the epitome of a Southern woman in her 90s.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was good.
Does she cook and
she cooks?
does the whole
every
spread
year she
and
says
everything?
she's not going to. And this year we did convince her to do the rotisserie chickens over preparing her own large turkey. And that was an adjustment for her. But she's wonderful. What about yours? Because this was your first Thanksgiving as a dad.
Yeah. It was good. There were a lot of unexpected family dynamics that are neither good or bad, just the realities in which we bumped into. But Thanksgiving Day was actually really fun. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see a lot of Grayson because he just got passed around the whole time. But I did get to play some of my favorite childhood video games with my 9-year-old, 8-year-old brother-in-law.
Okay, so wait. What? You got to...
So I have an 8-year-old brother-in-law. Ashley's little brother is 8, and he has a video game system.
Okay.
And since Grayson was being passed around...
You could play video games.
I just went and played video games with him.
And what were your childhood video games? This is...
Super Smash Bros.
Okay.
That was my quintessential, yeah. And it's popped up at multiple in college. One of my, college roommates got a GameCube.
Yep.
Actually, it was Jordan. It was Jordan's GameCube. So
you and Jordan were college roommates?
Mm-hmm. We were college roommates.
Learning so much.
And our sophomore year, we had 6 guys in one apartment.
Okay.
So 3 bed, 3 bath, and we all shared a room. And we played Super Smash Bros. Pretty much every night because,
why not?
C's get degrees. I don't know.
C's get degrees.
No, I'm just kidding. They were all very smart. They were all business majors. I was the film major. So
okay, you were the creative one.
Yeah, I guess so.
My husband had 8 roommates in an apartment with 1 bathroom, and they played. This is going to date them 007.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that was their game.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, so they would tell me he would say I can't go out tonight. We're bonding.
Nice. And that was video games.
Yes, because
Nice.
James Bond, bonding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So
That's funny.
yeah, he's hilarious. Yeah.
We had a room tally, so we would do teams.
Okay.
So we had a piece of printer paper taped to the wall of the living room, and we just had an ongoing tally of who would beat who how many times.
And who was like generally the victor?
Generally Jordan and I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
okay.
we would practice when everybody else was gone.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So.
Lots of intense times.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
yeah. But we did Halo freshman year in the dorm room.
Okay.
It was Halo, and then that was sophomore year, and then we grew up a little bit after that. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
junior year. So.
But you got to revert a little bit and have some video games.
Yeah, it
Good.
was fun. It was
Good.
fun. So.
Did it feel different being a dad?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like Thanksgiving legitimately felt different.
Well, yeah, because I mean, normally we're the, pop in here, and then we pop in here, and now
Okay.
it's like, popping in is like, hey, and then like, wah, the baby's
Yeah.
screaming, and that kind of thing. So it was definitely different. And
You mean he cries?
yes,
So
yes.
he's not sleeping through the night?
On occasion,
So
he
weird.
will scream bloody
Okay.
murder, but yeah, no, it's good. It's
Good,
good.
good.
So, all right, so you.
Okay.
Did the kind of story, empathy, post-Thanksgiving message this past
Okay.
week.
Yes.
And I wanted to drill down on a couple of things, a couple of questions that I had from your message, because
Okay.
it was, for everybody listening, it was a very timely message. It was really, I don't know if it was planned this way, but for you to be like in your childhood home and then sharing the stories, like that must have been quite a process leading up to Sunday.
Yeah, it was interesting to because it was sharing my mom's story, and I try really hard when I'm going to share about anybody to kind of get, I guess, their permission essentially.
Yeah.
And even though I realize like no one here will ever like know her. Probably.
Sure.
But I wrote her initial story out on paper and was just like, hey, check this, Mom. Am I saying anything you're not comfortable with?
Can I share this with
can I share
hundreds?
this with
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands and millions of people?
Yep.
And so it was interesting for her. I was wrong about some things. Like I thought she was married at 20. She's married at 18. I had some misconceptions. So even that sparked a really cool conversation. But that was still planned. I mean, I kind of am a planner by nature.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a couple months out, I think. And then
Yep.
what I knew I was going to be going home, but I don't think I anticipated how many moments would like pop up when I'm like, oh, I think they still think I'm 16 and bratty, and I still think they're Mom and Dad not letting me do my thing,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there were many moments when I was like, oh, okay, this is how that message applies.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you talked about, sorry, I'm drinking a LaCroix. One of the things you talked about was empathy and building empathy for one another's stories, in the sense that we want to, discover each other's stories, find out not just where something that bugs us about another person or family member comes from, and go, okay, just write them off. Actually go, oh, I wonder why they do that. I wonder where that comes from. I wonder what
Yeah.
that stems from. And then, it's funny because you do that, and all of a sudden you discover, oh my goodness. And where empathy really builds, and I've experienced in my life, is when you go, if I'd had that same experience, I'd probably act the same way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where that empathy thing happens. The one of the places I've struggled with empathy is that I think in a lot of ways it's become this kind of self-help fun word
Yeah.
that pops up in a lot of things, like, oh, empathy, this is, but it can devalue the power of empathy.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask you in terms of revaluing empathy is, like, where do you see empathy pop up theologically? Like when you think about Jesus and Paul and writers of the New Testament, Old Testament, where do you see empathy pop up that gives it value in a spiritual sense?
So, So I have several thoughts. So, I think it even comes back to creation, right? So I think we're wired. God hardwires us with empathy. And you can study empathy and you can see our receptors and how it fires, and that some people actually have stronger connections between their empathy receptors and some do not. So, but we all have empathy and we can grow it. It's malleable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I start with there, I'm like, God, why would you give us empathy? What would be the value? I mean, I can see kind of like the value in survival, but what does it do that's bigger than that? And so I think empathy gives us the ability not just to see others, but to see ourselves in others. And then I think Jesus comes along and he teaches that so well. So he gives all these examples, story after story of hey, I'm going to tell you this story, and then and he's such an amazing teacher. He just twists it at the right moment where you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's me. So I always think about like the Pharisee and the tax collector. And so like, the Pharisee's up front and he's like, God, I do all these amazing things for you. And there's this tax collector in the back of the room and he's like, God, I'm not worthy of you, but I'm so thankful that you choose me anyway. And the Pharisee looks back and he's like, well, at least I'm not like that guy, right? And so the audience is hearing the story and they're like, yeah, because most of the audience is probably going to be more like the tax collector. But I think Jesus like just lets it hang for a minute. And in my mind, like I immediately recognize that as soon as the tax collector stands up and says, well, at least I'm not arrogant like a Pharisee, I'm like, but you've just become that. And so often Jesus tells these stories where he's like, it's so easy for you to become the very thing. So if you can see that enough, maybe you'll give them grace when they walk into those spaces. Like,
it's like the prodigal son story.
Yeah.
He talks about the younger son, and then you instantly go like, oh, I would never. And then all of a sudden he calls you out as the older brother.
Yes.
And he's like, you are the Pharisee that's like, I would never.
Yeah. I mean, over and over again. There's a story of, I'm going to probably get names wrong, so I'm sorry, but I think it's Chuck Colson. He founds like a prison fellowship ministry, but he's talking to a banquet, and he's like, how many of you have ever been to prison? And most of the room, they're his donors. They don't raise their hand. And he said, how many of you, if you had gotten caught or followed a particular pattern in your life, you would have ended up in prison? Almost the whole room raises their hand. And I think Jesus teaches that way, right? Jesus is like, think about it for a second. You could be here.
Yeah.
And what would that look like for you? And that's why we get like the golden rule. Like that's not like something we've made up. Like God has like wired us to want to treat others. We will naturally, I think we fight against it, but like we know we're supposed to be treating others the way we want to be treated. But our own brokenness and our woundedness gets in the way of that. And Jesus is just kind of redirecting us all the time.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to Paul, I think he has a different technique that he uses his empathy. I think he's a good teacher, obviously, but like, for me, when I look at Paul, his empathy comes from, look, I have been the chief of sinners. Like he says that about himself. He's like, if anybody can do the things I've done and then still have an encounter with Christ and walk out and impact people's lives, you can. And so when I look at Paul, it may not be that he teaches us how to have empathy. He's just like, I'm an example of empathy.
Yeah.
Like if you can listen to my teaching and recognize what I've done and still choose to walk in this way, that's a beautiful thing. And if I can do it, you can do it. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Brennan Manning has this quote, I might butcher it, but it's like, those who have gazed deeply into the darkness of their imperfect existence are truly filled with the light.
Yes.
And it's like Paul, he's going like, I've been the darkest of darks, and he's completely full of light in what he does with his life.
And even when you think about like the Mansions of the Heart or St. John of the Cross or the You Are Here series that, Northpoint just did, like this idea of like the dark night of the soul, I think it's actually a part of the process to create empathy. So like God's like, I've set up a system where if you allow it to unfold and you look for me in all things, including people, especially in the people that drive you crazy, then you will see things that you kind of will blow your mind and will open you up and give you freedom. Like we spend a lot of energy being angry and irritated. And I think when I look at the religious leaders Jesus is addressing, they're just so irritated because people just aren't doing it the right way. And Jesus is like, but let's look at why, and let's look at who, and let's look at what the intent behind those laws really were. And it's so hard for some of them make the turn. We see Nicodemus, we see people that are like, okay, I think I can get that. But it's really hard for us once we're frustrated and once we're that older brother on the porch and we're irritated or the younger brother dealing with shame. It's very hard for us to allow empathy to come in and drive our conversations and how we engage with each other.
Yeah. I think I never thought about the golden rule that way until you just said that. I mean, the golden rule, treat people how you want to be treated, right? That's the golden rule. That's exactly like, in order to go, how do I want to be treated if I were them? That's empathy. It forces you to practice empathy, to put yourself in their shoes, to wonder how you'd want to be treated if you were them. Yeah. And Jesus says, treat people that way. That is such a tangible example of empathy showing up in Jesus' words.
Yeah, he's like, just this is really simple. He actually says, this is really it. This is almost, Matt Keeney actually said something Sunday morning in Inside Out that I loved. He said to the students, he said, several of you talked to me about wanting to grow spiritually, and I'm just going to tell you, if you just start being kind to the person you don't want to be kind to, you will see spiritual growth. And I feel like that's like basically saying, just have empathy. Yeah. You will see spiritual growth as a result of that empathy. But I know that I was thinking about with the golden rule, my kids were little, and we would talk to them about that, and they were in the back seat of the car, and they were fighting, because I have 2 boys. And so they were fighting, and I was like, well, so how does God tell us to treat each other? He tells us to treat each other as we would want to be treated. And one of my sons said, well, then he must not want to be treated well, because he's treating me poorly. And he used it as a way to like,
that's smart.
That's not how that works, but I understand what you're doing there.
Yeah.
But
Dang it, that was good.
But honestly, that is what we do. We kind of, someone ends up treating us a certain way, and so we match that treatment.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally, Jesus and Paul are kind of saying, like, I know the world says to act like this and to, like, be this dysfunctional, but I'm telling you, like, if you just walk this line with me, it will elevate everyone else. You don't have to match that dysfunction.
Yeah. So where empathy can get really difficult is when it's people who you share blood with, and you've been on the other side of them, almost like you know too much sometimes. So what I wanted to talk about was, you talked briefly about honor your mother and father, and I don't want to jump ahead because there are multiple questions and levels of this. This is a part of this one. There's kind of a American Western view of family and the individual is very, very different than the rest of the world, and very different than ancient times, in the sense that the family, it was all about family honor. Whereas in a more Western culture, it's individual honor. So I can pursue my individual honor at expense of the family, and that's okay, because the individual is the most important. And so this idea of honoring mother and father can be a little bit jarring when we live in a culture that's all about the individual. So you talked about honor in the sense of grievous, heavy, weighty. Can you unpack that a little bit more? And then I want to talk about what that means practically.
So I'll try. So keep guiding me if I can.
Yeah.
So when I hear what you're saying, I think about, and I love that point, Western culture is very individual. However, I could also, I think, make a case that this culture of my family drives me can be equally as dysfunctional, right? So when you're studying family counseling, they teach you these terms, and they teach you the term differentiation and enmeshment. So enmeshment is like, the word I think like sounds perfect. It's like you're literally meshed together. You're enmeshed. Your opinions are their opinions. Your thoughts are their thoughts. Your even your belief, like it all just kind of goes together. And so I remember learning about like some of the dysfunction that can come in families that are too enmeshed. And then they're like, so next week we'll talk about differentiation. So I came in, I was like, well, differentiation will mean totally separate, but it doesn't. It means I can remain an I in the midst of a we. Like this idea that like I'm a part of a system, but the system does not define me, but I am defined by the system. It's this weird tension that we walk in that I think both the West and the East need to learn how to figure out together, right? Like that it's not about the individual, but it's also not only about the system, right? And we have to be able to see the system from the outside. I think when we start talking about how do I honor, if my family in general feels very dishonoring or feels very dysfunctional or chaotic, and I feel convicted, or I feel like this sense, like we need to be a little different in this one-off relationship maybe, or maybe it's the whole dynamic. I think that when someone decides, someone has to say, I'm going to be the adult no matter what. Like, I'm going to be the adult no matter what all the adults in the room do. And I'm going to bring the health. And then where I notice people get tripped up is they think it's going to happen. They think I'm going to show up this Thanksgiving or this Christmas, and I'm going to be a really healthy version of myself, and then everybody else will be healthy versions of themselves too. And then it doesn't happen.
What?
What?
Yeah.
And they say this profound thing that they've learned, and the whole system doesn't seem to adapt. So I tell people often, like, systems get into rhythms, like dancing, and they have like these set points. And when someone says, I'm going to walk closer to you, we've been distant for years, but I think I need to try and get closer to you. I'm going to take that step. The system will naturally, subconsciously and instinctually reset the distance because it's uncomfortable, because we've just operated like this. So let's say your family's just been the way your family's been for years, and you're coming in and you're like, I want to address this issue. I want to address this pattern. It's going to take time to reset the system. So this is a long game play when you're deciding, I want to be someone who brings health into my family system. You're going to be patient. It's going to take some time. It means you're going to have to constantly probably have really good inner dialogue with yourself and not fall back into, like I said, like when I went home, I found myself making snarky comments to my dad. I'm like, I am 42 years old. Why am I being 16-year-old snarky? And it's because I was just falling right back into the pattern that we had kind of developed. So I think when you start saying, like, how do I be a part of a healthy system? It's like, well, it's going to take time. You're going to have to do the dance a different way, and that's awkward, and you're going to step on toes. But if you keep trying with it, then I think it can eventually get there. Now, we start talking about, like, what if I have, like, a super unhealthy dynamic? Like, maybe there's an addiction, or a substance abuse issue, or there's physical abuse, neglect, and all those things. Like I said, I feel like I tried to say it a million times Sunday. Like, you deciding to get healthy does not mean you now have unhealthy boundaries. And that's a little bit of the rub too. The best example I can give is a pastor friend of mine. His father was an alcoholic. And the rule for them was, if we show up and Grandpa is drunk, we will give him his Christmas gifts and we will leave, but we will call the next day. We will try again the next Christmas. And for him, that was taking in, there's a passage, I think it's Lamentations, that says, like, your mercy is new every morning. And so he did this application of that with his family. He said, I'm going to call every day. If you're drunk, I'm going to say, all right, Dad, I'll try again tomorrow. You're not tolerating and jumping in the drama and arguing, why are you drinking again? You're not getting into all that with them. You're just resetting the tone every day. And that sounds exhausting, because you're like, so you're going to do that for years? Yeah. And you might be the only one that does it, but you will know that you have, there's this passage in Romans that says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And so when Paul says that, I get this mental image of, like, okay, well, one, I can only go as far as I can go, and I can't make you go any further, but I can do my part. Andy Stanley always calls it, like, owning your piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. Like, so own your part, do your thing. You may have to reset every day. Otherwise, I think we tend to have this idea of, like, well, Grandpa's always drunk, we're never going to see Grandpa again. Mm-hmm. And I would never feel like I had a place to tell a family to do that or not. But there's just something in that makes me go, is there a way, maybe there isn't always a way, but is there a way that we can do that? Maybe we can't go physically see Grandpa because we're concerned about how the grandkids are going to engage or what they're going to see. Yeah. But I can call Grandpa every day. Yeah. I had one person who had a really tense relationship with his dad, so he refused to communicate with him at all, but he was feeling tugged to do something. He was really angry, and I just suggested, like, just send a Father's Day card. I wouldn't even know what to write. I was like, you don't have to even write anything. Just send a Father's Day card at first. And so sending the card started, and then maybe a note came, and then maybe a conversation came. And so I think spending time to say, okay, what can I do that doesn't compromise the safety of my kids or the safety of my mental health, but could I actually do to take a step? Yeah. And I don't think we have that question often enough in ourselves, right?
Yeah. Why? I'm curious, if I'm playing devil's advocate and you're saying these things.
Okay.
And you're like, hey, send the card, or call every day, or keep fighting for the relationship. I think a lot of people might go, well, I'm exhausted and I'm tired, and statistically speaking, they'll never be done with that addiction, or mm-hmm. Why should I send the card?
So, and I realize not everybody will have this vantage point. So for me, it's because I believe that's what, and I can only say this for me because I have in my worldview, God has to drive my decisions. If I'm left to my own devices, I will be super judgy and super isolated and super cut off because people make me tired. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I don't want to deal with it. But when I step back, I'm like, okay, I don't think that's how I'm really supposed to live. So there's a verse that says, like, do not grow weary in doing good. And that verse says, do not grow weary because it is wearisome. Like, we wouldn't have to be told not to grow weary if it wasn't ever weary. And so when someone says to me, like, that's exhausting, I just kind of want to be like, yeah, I know. Mm-hmm. And I'm here. So when you're exhausted, come be exhausted with me. And then take a break, take a breather. Maybe, it's like, hey, last year I sent that card. We'll just keep using that example. And it really took a lot emotionally out of me. Okay, the next year we don't send the card. But we don't have to write the rules forever right now. Mm-hmm. And we do that a lot with people, right? We're like, listen, Jeremy hurt me, so forever Jeremy is gone. Yeah. Or forever I have this view of Jeremy, which is not, if everybody judged me on my 20-something self or my 30-something self For sure, I don't want my parents to judge me by my 16-something self. So why am I judging them by their 30-something parent self? You know, so like, I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to be, well, that's just Jenn. She'll never change. So I can't, even though I know that it's exhausting. And I know that statistically change is hard. But so because I want to have room to grow, I have to allow others and have hope. And we read Paul's passages about love and peace and patience and stuff. Hope's always a part of that. And I think we lose hope. And I understand why, because we've been hurt. Some of us extremely hurt. And sometimes hope feels unsafe. And I would never encourage anyone to do something that is unsafe, but I would challenge us to think that maybe we can have hope while staying safe at the same time. So I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a break. It's like, hey, look, this Christmas I just couldn't manage the drama. I just didn't, it was not healthy enough for me. But I would say to someone that would say, it's not healthy for me to engage with my family dynamic at all, without knowing kind of, I would want to know a little more behind that, but I would just say, okay, so are you at least working on why that does that? Why does that exhaust you? You know, what does it look like for you to kind of, I always get the visualization. I'm like super Bible-y. I don't think I realize how Bible-y I can be. And I wasn't raised with the Bible, so
what did you do for school?
Oh, theology.
Yeah, yeah.
Somewhat connects, but no, because I know I didn't grow up in church, so I feel like when I make Bible references, I don't ever want to assume everybody knows them, because that always bothered me when I started going to church. I was like, I don't know who Daniel is, you know.
Yeah.
But when I picture this topic, I think we don't believe in ourselves very much. So it's like if I'm using you, I would say, hey, Jeremy, if you've got family drama, you can be like Peter. You stand in the storm, and yes, you see it coming, and yes, it's swirling around you. But you can still stand in the storm. And you can actually be healthy. You and Ashley and Grayson can be healthy while every other thing swirls around you. It is not your monkeys, not your circus, right? Like you can be outside it and still have hope for it. But you don't have to jump in it. But you still are a part of it. Yeah. I mean, to act like that doesn't have something to do with you is also foolish.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know if that answered any of your questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
For sure. I think I just get that response a lot. I get the, like, you know, the quick cutoff. Like, well, now I'm free, you know, like from like students here or something like that. Now I'm free. Well, my mom did this. I'm just going to cut her off. Like, I'm done, you know. And I've always, you know, I can connect the dots as to why, in terms of just values and principles being driven by God, it kind of takes that off as an option.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and this is totally kind of a tangent, but I always think that I get the question every now and then, why is Christian marriage different than any other kind of marriage? I don't know why that's a normal question, but I'm always like, well, because I'm not accountable to my husband. I'm accountable to God to be the best wife I can be. And I know that he's accountable to God. So like, that's kind of a win-win, not because we're perfect by any means. And he drives me crazy and I drive him really crazy. But it's kind of the principle I said Sunday about like my kids. I said, you know, I'm accountable for the kind of parent I am. And if you don't have a source of accountability, so like that's why the 12 steps start with a higher power, right? So like, I know that if someone is listening and they're like, I'm not into any of that. Well, then I understand that. And so that's a weird thing. But when you're asking me like, what is the source that drives me to honor? It's in its simplest form, it's what I'm told to do. Now, my personality is also super duper wired, like for, obey the rules, right? And other personalities won't be, and that might make those tensions a little more difficult too. But yeah, I have a source that told me to be, and I trust that source, and I just keep walking in that direction. Yeah. Regardless of if they walk or not. Yeah, that's good. Now, one of the things that helps you walk in that direction and other people just generally are healthy boundaries. And you mentioned these a couple times recently, just in this conversation and on Sunday. But what does it look like if somebody's going, oh my goodness, I have no boundaries? What does it look like to establish healthy boundaries? So again, like I love that example of like, hey, I have this dad who every time I show up, he's drunk. So I still show up. But if he's drunk, I leave. And I let Dad know, Dad, I love you. You're drunk. I will call you tomorrow. And there's not a lot of shame. We just kind of simplify it. Yeah. Now, if you're someone that's like too caught up in the family drama, in some ways I would want to have a conversation about why are you enjoying that drama? Well, I don't enjoy that drama. Well, I mean, you're used to it. You're in the rhythm and you're doing the dance too. So you seem super enmeshed. Like everything is driven by your family. Everything is driven by you don't seem like you have you're not an individual in the midst of a system. You just seem like you're drowning in the system. I would want to unpack that. I feel like that's hard to give a general, like, hey, just do this. I think it's almost easier to take super dysfunctional and have harder boundaries that are more clear than it is to detangle someone. But I think, helping them see the mess and seeing where they're participating. So maybe an example I had an adult mom. I had a mom and an adult daughter. And her adult daughter really struggled to hold a job, to provide, to really be responsible in a lot of ways. And so the mom would come to me and she's like so frustrated. She's exhausted. And she's like, so-and-so just won't get it together. So her solution was she hired the daughter. So the daughter never had to worry about being on time for work because now mom gives the paycheck. And all this was driven by care for the granddaughter, right? So usually when I find a system, an enmesh system would be an enabling system. Like you're not letting someone have responsibility for themselves. They're not going to be able to mature. And God actually doesn't have any space to do what he would like to do in their life because you're doing it for him. So she was frustrated with this daughter, but she was doing it all in an attempt to care for the granddaughter, which I love. But I said, so you're punishing her because you are setting up a system in which she doesn't have to deal with anything, but you're mad at her. So you're passive aggressive, you're snarky, you're insulting, and all under the name of taking care of your granddaughter. And I said, if you choose to take care of your granddaughter, you are absolutely within your rights, and I totally get that. But then you can't be mad at your yes on how that translates into your daughter's life. So I think taking a big step back and saying, okay, so why am I giving that person all that money? Why I'm so mad at them that every holiday they want another check. Okay. Then what does it look like? Just walk through mentally what it could look like to not give the check.
Yeah. You could also add, not just finances, but why am I giving them all that emotion?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
It's the same thing every time. Like, why am I just giving that to them every time they do that same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. A phrase I use a lot is like, why are they taking up mental real estate? They're living rent free in your head. Raise the rent and evict them.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm also challenging us to do that while we all have hope. Like, so it's this weird dynamic, but I do think like taking a step back and seeing why you're so enmeshed, and you might be giving someone energy, resources, time, because your heart's really good, but it may not be giving them the space to develop themselves. And that's where you almost have to kind of say, okay, I don't want to be that person. I want them to have that space.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you were talking about the example of the pastor friend, with the phone call, okay, well, I'll call again tomorrow. I really liked that because I think sometimes on the other side of family, people can feel like it's a roller coaster ride, and you're up and you're down and you're up and you're down and you're up or down. And that kind of boundary keeps you from getting on the roller coaster.
Yes.
And you can watch it from the side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And he's watching it, and if
it hurts to watch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. But if his dad's drunk, then he does, he doesn't get on the ride and he did it again. And oh my goodness, and then if he's not, well, cool. Okay. We get to enjoy this for a second.
Yeah. I think when we're younger, we think that we keep walking with that, like dad's on the ride because we take it personally. And I even do the same thing with my kids. Like my kids are on their roller coaster and I take it personally. And I'm always like, it's not personal. It's not personal. Right. Like it's, like the part of the thing I think that God was really showing me and really just reminding me my mom's story is like, that is her roller coaster, and I've got my own. But she's not trying to, like, figure herself out, like, to me. She's not, like, doing it to me, just like my boys aren't being teenagers at me.
Yeah.
They're doing their thing. They're doing their thing. And I want to be a part of what's happening, but I can watch. I don't have to be on it with them unless I want to be. And there are a lot of personalities, I think, that do find themselves wanting to be for different reasons. They have to kind of analyze.
Yeah. Buck has that phrase, he says a lot that I like, what's in you is going to come out of you on those around you. And it's kind of like as you figuring your own stuff out, what's in you is going to come out on those around you, right?
Yep.
To wrap up, we talk a lot about counseling at Northpoint because we see a lot of value in just going back in order to go forward, you know, and doing that heart work to be able to bring those things to God and grow spiritually in that way and relationally. Counseling is one of the tools. For some people, that's like, oh, I don't know if I can take that step.
Yeah.
What are some other tools you would say would help people with this kind of empathy, honoring mother and father, just this whole family thing.
That whole thing. I mean, I think so. I mean, if you can talk with someone, a mentor, a trusted person, a pastor, I mean, I think those are all really good resources to kind of unpack a little bit verbally, right? When it comes to considering your own story, like I love what you said, go back to go forward. There are actually a lot of really great books. I mean, there's so many. Like you can just go on Amazon and look at like books that help you write your story. And you could even just start simply that. Just write your story. And if you're like, well, I don't know how to write my story, there are books that they will ask you questions that when you step back, you're like, oh, I just wrote my story because I responded to their questions. That could be a super easy thing that no one even has to know you're doing. Just order the book, and then just start writing your story. When I start meeting with people, one of the things I'll often have them do is write their memories. And I'm like, don't overthink it. Just literally just write their memories down, half a piece of paper, and just from the beginning all the way. And then we'll kind of sit with that for a minute. And then I'll say, write the messages that memory gave you. And when I did this for myself, I was like, honestly, a lot of the things that I really struggled with, especially in my 20s and 30s, like didn't actually come from my parents. They came from my peers. I had a couple of really big experiences with peers that I didn't even really consider. I think we're kind of taught also culturally, everything comes from mom and dad. We discount work trauma. You can have a bad experience with a boss, and it can literally shape the way you enter every work situation from that point forward. Yeah. You can have triggers from peer situations. It can be
coaches, maybe.
Coaches, that's a great, So really looking at your memories, the things that like stick out to you, and what message did you receive at that time will help you know your story better. When it comes to, I love what Elena shared that her therapist had her do with, when it comes to practically unpacking other stories, I think just ask. Maybe give them the book. Maybe you order a book and then you're like, hey, Mom, I did this book. Would you do this so I could see your story?
Yeah.
Like, let them tell you. Because, again, like when I wrote out this story for my mom and I sent it to her, she called. She's like, it's just so funny the things that you think about my childhood. This is actually how some of that went down.
Yeah.
So even just doing some of those simple exercises like that. And that's actually, honestly, as cheesy as it is, like Christmas, that's, you can do like one of those, like, tell me your storybooks as a gift and be like, I genuinely want to know your story without judgment.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you get it and you learn something from it.
Yeah. Do you have one of those on your mind that we can...
On a book?
Yeah.
I don't. I just feel like there's tons out there. There are tons, there are tons of people that, like, that's how they start by writing their book. There's I don't know, I forget his name. I think it's Les Brown. I don't know his name. Anyway, he says the graveyard is the richest place. And what he means is like great stories, great moments, great ideas went there to die because we didn't capture them. So there's so many. I can like look some up and send them to you. But there are tons.
Maybe we can put them in the YouTube description.
Okay, yeah. Afterwards. There's just, I mean, if you just like, write your story, journal prompt, like it's just going to flood you with tons.
Cool.
So.
Cool.
I should know a book. I should just like.
No,
but I don't go.
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's great. Last question.
Oh, I thought that was the last one.
No,
Okay.
I thought of another one.
Okay, good.
To somebody who is feeling very discouraged,
Okay.
very beat down, very kind of done with family relationship dynamic, something that they've been stuck in for a while, what would you say to them?
So, I guess, you didn't send me this one in advance.
Sorry, on the spot.
I guess my heart immediately wants to say, I get it. I totally get it. And that makes total sense. It is exhausting. It is tiring. And you do need to take a minute. But I would also say this. These are not things I think, and again, this has to do with my worldview, right? Like if I'm coming from a place with a Christian perspective, it's gonna color that a lot. But like, you aren't supposed to do this alone. You actually can't do it almost. Like we love that Isaiah passage that when you wait on the Lord, those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. And so it's God doing that work, not you doing it. Like if you're a doer or a task, and like, well, if I do this, then they'll do this, but it didn't work. If I say this, then they didn't work. Everything I tried doesn't work. They don't get any healthier. And I would say, I know. And I would do I like the roller coaster thing. They have to go on that journey. And I know you are tired. And I want to be, or people, make sure you've got some people alongside you that hold your arms up right? Like we see these examples of like, look, I can't hold my arms up anymore. I cannot lift them up. They won't do the work themselves. Like, I get it. So, make sure you're in community. Make sure you have space and pockets of things that are just for you. And don't neglect those things, because you're going to want to neglect them, but don't neglect them. You have to. I was in therapy one time, and my therapist was like, every time you come in here trying to get something else done. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I just want you to come in here. I don't want you to read. I don't want you to get work done. And it was like a weird sensation to be like, okay, this is just 15 minutes for just me. So I would say, I get it. I get that you're tired. Find a thing. Like, what's a thing that you can do that no one else gets value out but you? And sit and do that intentionally, and understand that you can't do it on your own. You aren't designed. You're not designed to fix other people. So if maybe part of your exhaustion comes from trying to be something you're not supposed to be for them. But, I think I would just start with, yeah, I get it, which I know is not very satisfying, but like, other than like, no, yeah, you should be tired.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not a wimp. There's nothing wrong with you. It's exhausting, but we got to keep going. And people are like, oh, great, that sounds great. And I'm like, I know, but we can.
Yeah.
But not in our own strength.
Yeah. Yep.
I know
that's really good.
A non-helpful answer.
No, it is, because it goes back to that, like, what's the driving value? What's the why? And if it is, well, okay, God calls me to love him, then yeah, okay, I don't know about 10 years from now, I don't know about 5 years, I don't know about 1 year, but this next one, I'll do my best.
I do think that's great, is stop taking it like the next 12 holidays at a time, or the next 12 family encounters, literally like at that Mercy New every morning. I'll just take today, God. I'll just take today. And I do think that there was some validation when I felt like really, really looking at that commandment that we mentioned on Sunday, and like, oh, it feels heavy on purpose. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
And so, or not crazy about that, like that makes sense. And God actually knew it was going to be heavy from the beginning. So, and there's some, I don't know. Anyway, I just think that like, that's a good source for me. It's like, well, I know. And I've told God many times, like, I'm done. And I feel like God is like, okay, let's be done for 5 minutes. And then
I
think we get space to be done. But.
Yeah. It's good talk. Jen, thank you so. Well, I was just thinking too, I wanted to add something, and I was like, I need to wrap this up, and now I'll add it. Sometimes it might warrant being done for a season.
Yes.
Sometimes there's been enough damage, or in order to get enough space mentally, emotionally, to re-engage and to start something new, or try to break a generational pattern, you really might need to go, you know what? I'm going to give myself 6 months.
Yeah, I love the word season. I think is super important in that. And I even love the 6-month idea. Like, it doesn't have to be 2 days necessarily. Maybe you can't do the everyday phone call thing, but you can do some kind of thing. And I think making a plan is super important. Like, hey, okay, I'm going to put this on a shelf for 6 months. And you can even say to that person, like, hey, I need to take a break. They don't have to understand it, and they can argue. You can let them swirl and toil and do all their things over there. But for 6 months, I'm not going to be able to come by for about 6 months. And then walk that out, and then reapproach.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that a season, and I think going ahead and having a plan on what that season looks like helps people too.
Yeah. Cool.
See, you're telling everybody how to do this.
There you go.
There you go. Done.
Well, Jen, thank you so much.
All right.
Being on the podcast.
Yes.
And I'm excited for when you are going to be teaching next.
Okay.
Which is TBD.
Okay.
For everybody else.
Oh, okay.
But I really know
we don't
what
talk
it is.
about that here?
I don't know.
Oh,
I guess we don't have to.
I don't know. I don't remember, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect. I'll remind you
okay,
then.
good. Yes, please remind me.
Anyways, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Awesome.
And to everybody listening, we will see you Sunday.
Okay.